Well, I agree with most of what Nik Abdul Aziz has said, and just 2 points which I thought are worth highlighting here. Number one is the dominance of religious elites. In all religions, this is the problem. When, as a Muslim, one shares this problem of a dominant religious elite with people of other religions, you find that they have the same problem. So I think this is something that confronts all of us. It's not to run them down or to say, well, these people have done terrible things. I think we have to look at the realities, and this is what I think Nik Aziz was trying to do. You know, there are problems created by their approach, and we have to critique this. What has happened in some religions, and this is true of at least certain sections of the Muslim community, the religious elite claim to be the sole interpreters of the divine word. In the process, they themselves become divine. This is the problem. That they interpret the divine word and they claim to become divine, or they are seen as divine. And that, I think, is a very
their
big
words
problem.
become divine.
Yeah, but you know, the way in which they are regarded, you can't criticize them. So the person itself, you know, the human being itself takes on a certain aura, which I think is very unfortunate. It's particularly unfortunate in the context of Islam, because, as you know, Islam doesn't have a priesthood. It doesn't have a priesthood, and yet it has created a priesthood that functions like any other priesthood. Yeah? So that's one point that I wanted to reinforce what Nik Aziz had brought to our notice. And the other point is this: I mean, his fear that we would, in the process of opposing hegemony and working towards a new world order, that the old nationalisms would re-emerge, that would be seen as the way forward. Perhaps, we don't know. But I think there are perhaps two forces that we have to keep in mind too. This is a totally different world. Borders have become far less significant. Globalization, whatever its motives may be, is this real? There's an economic dimension, there's a technological dimension to globalization, and the technological dimension in particular is irreversible. Certain other aspects you can reverse, but I don't think the technological dimension of globalization can ever be reversed, because technological changes cannot really be reversed. I mean, you can't sort of say we abandon electricity, we go back to, you know, lighting a fire. You know, it just doesn't work that way. Technological advances are there. They're shaping globalization, shaping our mindsets. For that reason, I don't think the old nationalism is possible anymore. And where we have a role to play, meaning by which human beings, where we can intervene in the historical process, I think it is so important for us to establish links. That's where interfaith dialogue comes in, the point that you made. Nik Aziz is absolutely right that there's no reason for Muslims to be scared of interfaith dialogue. In fact, Malaysia is one of the very few countries where this is happening. In many other countries, there's no problem. Muslims are actively involved in interfaith dialogues, where they are a minority and where they are majority. They're actively involved in interfaith dialogues. But in this country, there's a tremendous fear of interfaith dialogue, because I think what we are confronted with here is actually an ethno-religious phenomenon. I often use this term, ethno-religious. It's linked to ethnicity. It's not so much Islam as such, it's ethnicity. It's ethnicity. You know, the fear that one's identity, ethnic identity, would be undermined if there is this sort of dialogue and sharing and all the rest of it. Look at the role that Islam played in dialogues. You can say that the Quran, from a certain perspective, is a dialogue with Christians and with Jews. There's so many passages that refer to, well, that dialogue, as it were, about ideas, certain beliefs, and all the rest of it. And one can even argue that the Prophet's life itself, he transformed the notion of dialogue into reality. Look at the Charter of Medina. Equal rights and responsibilities for everyone. Equal rights and responsibilities for everyone. Muslims who are a minority in Medina, and all the other communities. You look at his treaty with the Christians of Najran, which is part of Arabia. Again, the notion of, you know, rights, responsibilities, recognition, acknowledgement, and then right through Muslim history. What had happened in different periods of Muslim history. Andalusia, the Ottomans, the Mughals, and Malacca. I always talk of these four great centers of Islam in history as examples of cosmopolitanism, of a cosmopolitan outlook. Andalusia, on the western side, the Ottomans, more or less the central, part, and so on. The Mughals, and Malacca. People forget that Malacca was one of the great centers of cosmopolitanism. At its time, Spain is Andalusia, that is the western side, Andalusia. But if you look at Malacca, at its peak, 80 languages were spoken in Malacca. 80 languages in all the different communities living together in Malacca. And it was just amazing. We forget this. This is part of Islam's history. Unfortunately, the sort of Wahhabi type of thinking has become stronger in some circles. Very narrow, very bigoted in some circles. What is called Wahhabism, which again is a term that is a little controversial. But narrow thinking, that is what we are concerned about. Narrow, bigoted thinking, that is the problem. And Nik Aziz is right. One way out is to strengthen interfaith dialogue, because that way one's thinking begins to change.